Previously, we discussed how to make selections by selecting object subcomponents. I want to explore that further with a NURB surface so you can see what the important components are and how you might manipulate them. So here I have a NURBS primitive plane. I'm set to select by object type right now, but I can switch that over to select by component type. Now none of the component type filters are activated right now. I'm going to activate a few of these so you can see what they look like and how you might transform them. The first one is vertex. I'll go ahead and activate that. When I activate that, you'll see that the vertices appear in the view panel. Now for a NURBS plane, some of those vertices appear along the edge, some at the corners, and some in the interior. As soon as you see them, though, you can select them. For instance, you can click on one vertex and select it. It turns yellow. Or you can drag a selection box around several of them and pick them all at once. Now, once you have them selected, you can apply transform tools like move, rotate, or scale. Now, based on how many I've selected and what their locations are, they'll have a bigger or smaller effect on the shape of the surface. Now, anticipation of moving them around, I'm going to turn on shading. So one quick way to get a big result in terms of the shape of the surface is to select an entire column along an edge. So there I've drawn a selection box over the edge and picked 4 vertices. So now I can go to the Move tool and move them. And when I move them, the NURBS plane bends. It tries to stay as curvy as possible, but it does bend. Now you notice that some of the vertices are left behind, like the ones down here. That's because NURBS vertices do not necessarily rest on the surface itself. Most often they're away from the surface. It's just the way that NURBS curves function in order to make a surface. So I can go and pick another edge worth of vertices and move those, and bend the shape as if it's a piece of fabric or a piece of paper. Now you can still move individual vertices. For instance, I'll pick one vertex right here, move that. If I do move that far enough, I do get a bend in the surface. Or I can pick a vertex on a corner, like this one, and move that. So you can see how the vertices definitely have an effect on the shape of the final NURB surface. Now you can also apply scale and rotation to the vertices. In fact, you'll have a more noticeable result if you pick multiple vertices. For instance, if I go back to an edge and pick all the edge vertices and go to rotate, I can rotate those. And then rotate around the pivot point, which is in the center of the plane. I can also scale them. If I go to the Scale tool, I can scale them. And as I scale them, they get farther apart from each other. So you can see vertices have quite an effect on the surface. Now, the next component type I want to talk about is hull. Hulls are directly related to vertices. If I turn on the Hull button, which is the 5th one up here in the status line, there are the hulls. The hulls are a type of cage. Now my hull is pretty bent up now, so what I can do is go and make another NURB surface so you can see that better. I'm going to go back and create another plane. And I'll move that plane. Alright, so I'll go back to object type and then back to component type. And then since vertex and hull are activated, I'll see the vertices and hulls on this new plane. So initially, the hull looks like just a purplish grid. Now the way it works is, at the intersection of each hull line, that's where vertices sits. So they're intrinsically related. Now you can pick an entire hull line by just clicking on it. When you pick that hull line, all the vertices along that line are selected. So you can move that hull, and it has really the same effect as moving an entire row or column of vertices, because they are related. Now I'm still free to pick a vertex if I see it, and move that, but you see as I move the vertex, the hull also changes shape. So the hull is a type of cage that holds the vertices. In any case, you can pick any of the hull lines you want to, and move that, or rotate it, or scale it. So here's another hull line I've selected. I'll move that up. Now here you see that the hull is definitely away from the surface, as are the vertices. So once again, unless you have a vertice or a hull that's on the very edge of a surface, they don't tend to sit on the surface itself, but sit away from the surface. When it comes to rendering later on, the holes don't render, nor do the vertices. It's only the surface that renders. So really the hole and the vertices are just so you can manipulate the surface to change its shape or do other modeling tasks. Now, the third component I want to talk about is the isoparm. I'm going to turn off hull and turn off vertex and go to isoparm, which is the third button here, which looks like a little line. Now, isoparms can either be edges or they can be subdivision lines along the center of the surface. For instance, if I click on the edge now, that's considered an isoparm. It's the edge line. Or I can select this edge. I can also have isoparms along the center. Now, because my NURBS plane is so simple, I do not see any isoparms along the center. But what I can do is to make a slightly more complex plane so we can see that. So I'll go back up to Create. And this time I'm going to go to NURBS Primitives Plane, but I'm going to look at the option box for plane. Again, if you see an option box, there's a set of options there that you can change. So I'm going to go to the option box. And this time when I make my NURBS plane, I'm going to go down to U patches and V patches and increase that. And this is really the number of subdivisions you have on your NURBS plane. So let's say I want to make 3 by 3. And then I'll hit Create. And there's my new plane. So what I've done by saying 3 by 3 U and V patches is to give myself 3 NURBS faces per direction. So each little square here is a face. So 1, 2, 3 in that direction, 1, 2, 3 in the other direction for a total of 9. Again, if you want to create those subdivisions, go to Create, NURBS Primitives, Plane, Option Box, and you're just changing the U patches and V patches. I'm just going to close that so I do not make a new one. In any case, when you have a greater number of subdivisions like this, you'll have interior isoparms. So I can click one of these interior isoparms, like this one, and it turns yellow. Or this one right here, it turns yellow. Of course, I can still pick the edge isoparm. So really the isoparms are subdivisions if they're along the center of the NURBS surface. Now whenever you have a greater number of subdivisions, it means you also have a greater number of vertices and a more complex hull. Because again, they go hand in hand. So if I go and turn on vertex again, and I turn on hull, you can see I have a more complex hull now. It requires more vertices and more hull lines to define those additional subdivisions. If I have more subdivisions, I can have a more complex shape with my NURBS surface. For instance, I can move some of these hull lines around and get much finer bends, because now I have more controls. I have more vertices, more hull lines. There's more places to move and manipulate the NURBS surface. So my curviness is much more curvy because I have more control now. So we'll return to these various components because they're very critical for modeling. So you'll be able to use them over and over. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention is you don't necessarily have to go up here to the status line to make these selections. In fact, there's a shortcut called a marking menu you can activate. What you do is go to the View panel, place your mouse someplace over the surface, right mouse button click, and if you hold the right mouse button down, you get a special marking menu. This is a shortcut menu that appears where your mouse is. As long as you hold your right mouse button down, this menu will appear. If you continue to hold the mouse button down, you can drag your mouse and you get a little string. And that string you can place over one of your menu options and select it. When you select the menu option and let go, then that menu item is applied. For instance, you can tell it to turn on vertices here with Control Vertex so you can select them. So I'll just let go of my mouse now. And now I'm in vertex mode. If I go back and try that menu again, right mouse click. I can also go into isoparm mode, so I can pick isoparms. If I go back to the menu one more time, I can go to hulls, and there are the hulls. If I go back to the menu one more time, there's also object mode, so I can go back to selecting the entire object. So the marking menu with the right mouse key is a great shortcut for making some of your component types visible so you can select them and then transform them. In other words, you don't have to go all the way up here to the status line to turn these on or off. It's right here where the object is.